Right, electrical systems of the body. Tuesday the 3rd of June 1980. Having been a physiotherapist for many years, I have, and I do acupuncture as well, I have realised how extraordinary the electrical systems of our body are and how we don't all run on the same thing. And there is another dictation about how we exist on something like 9 or 10 different electrical frequencies. And that the really important thing is to find somebody. We know that our blood groups are different, and we know a certain amount of where these blood groups have come from, and we know about and we know that our brain patterns are different, and that when people have similar brain patterns, they tend to get on better. But the medical profession today really doesn't look at the acupuncture circuit at all. They just look at the way the muscles work. And although they're very clever in so many ways, the most important, I think, is the chakras and the meridians. And those, I believe, are the soul's connection to the body. And if your soul becomes disconnected from your body, well, then there you are, curtains. So anyway, this is what they're saying about the electrical systems of the body. So this was given to my mother on the 3rd of June 1980. If the medical profession is to progress, it must understand every aspect of what it is to be healthy, and in this way to help the people it serves. The greatest advance that the medical profession will make in this discovery of the electrical frequencies upon which the body works, and these are very many and various and different from one person to another, it has already been discovered that the blood goes in groups, and there is very much more to the blood than your scientists and doctors have yet learned. In fact, the Chinese refer to it as qi, energy, simply because they've not thought about it sufficiently, and about the whole business of the electrical way in which every single thing that has life, even plants, work on some sort of electrical frequency. And this is very important. The electrical pulses that work on electric light bulb are one frequency. Those that power something rather larger and more ponderous are another, and so on. And so it is with the human body. To try to give this message even 100 years ago would have been impossible, because they had not yet come to the knowledge that you have now in your planet, and the up-to-date advanced machinery and the means with which you have available to you to make all of these discoveries by means of a few simple experiments. The human body has very many different frequencies, and as we have said already, people exist really, or ought to exist, in groups of people. This is not only right from a point of view of procreation, but for their general happiness. People of like minds, compatible body systems and blood groups are always happiest and healthiest this way. This has always been so, and will always be so. It is the way in which humanity and all of the creatures that exist have been designed to fit into the scheme of life as it has been designed and created. All the knowledge which we shall give in the book will mean, if it is to give anything whatsoever to the medical profession, a great deal of research which must go on for a very long time, because everything will need to be proved, and as things are proved, new facts will be discovered, all of which are very simple and indeed obvious. But it is simply that doctors never look at things in a simple way, but regard certain things as unsolved mysteries, and have developed their science from the early investigations of people like Leonardo, who was a very deep-thinking man for his day, but placed in a pant of extreme ignorance, and so primitive that any sort of operation in those days was impossible. Life was indeed brutish, short, and terrible for most people who lived in those times. And to digress slightly, I believe that Leonardo da Vinci is Sir Richard Rogers, and I think that I've forgotten his name. I always forget his name. Anyway, he keeps doing all these things. He's Jewish now, and he does all these things for BBC on Leonardo, and I think he was Francis I, who became one of his patrons. It's not very much more than 150 years ago that bloodletting was considered the way to help people who were ill, and the results were nearly always disastrous. Sick people were better to leave things to the faint hope of a natural recovery in those times. Medicine has improved beyond all recognition in the past few years, and more discoveries are being made daily. But in almost every case, the doctors are trying too hard, using enormous amounts of money and looking at things in completely the wrong way. Nearly all the research we hope that will be done on this very simple principle would teach them very much. Careful experiments need to be done on the human brain to discover where all the various little chambers are and how power flows around it. Let us say here that your government has got to realise that people must be paid for the things they do. Very elderly people who are certain to die within a very short time and are often extremely poor will gladly submit to a painless experiment if given money or payment which can be given to their families at their death. There will be plenty of volunteers without any doubt, and this must be a principle of the future. Everyone must be paid for what they do. It will be possible in the future, after careful experimentation, to remove a section of the brain completely and give a transplant from another body which works on a similar frequency. Let us say this now, that the heart, kidney and liver transplants that are now becoming so common, very many of these procedures would cease to be necessary in about 100 years' time, when hopefully this world's humanity has learned a very great deal and people become a lot healthier. If it is required to make a transplant, then the body from which that transplant is made should be on the same frequency as the one into which the new organ is being transplanted. I have to say I wouldn't be volunteering for that. This is very important, and a heart transplant will work very much better, and in fact, any other transplant, if this simple fact is adhered to. People are not the same, and their reactions and the way in which they move are all different. A heart placed in the body of someone who works on a different frequency cannot hope to last more than a very short time, and it is amazing to us that so many of them have lasted as they have done, and have been as successful as they have been. Even the movements of the heart are different in the body of two people who work on an entirely different electrical frequency and with different brain patterns from each other. And there are, I've got my comment here, but also there are things like when you do a transplant, people often get a certain amount of that person's, the donor's character and their likes and dislikes, even some of their memories. And the kidney stores your genealogy. So if that person, unbeknownst to our doctors, is about to go into some sort of illness, it's very likely that the recipient of their kidney will develop it. So it's a very chancy business. There's a lot we don't understand. Anyway, this was my comment. I can testify to this. I think this is the, what was I think? Oh yes, this is how people's hearts move differently. I can testify to this, as some years ago I offered some healing to a friend who had been troubled with an irritating cough and breathlessness for some time. He is a dear man, and we were all on a yoga retreat in Greece that he had arranged. I arrived on the second week, and during our first class my friend had a coughing fit and said that he had been troubled by this cough for a year now, and on his return to England was going for a chest x-ray and some blood tests. I had periodically noticed that he seemed to have cold symptoms and was worried about him. I felt that he was working too hard and that his problems were to do with his heart in some way. Being an Eastern man, he's very open to healing and alternative medicine. So when suddenly I found myself standing in front of him without others to overhear us, I offered to give him a treatment before we joined the others for dinner. All true healers are aware of the power passing through them and are aware of their bodies making a sort of circuit with the person that they're trying to heal. Hence, as I placed my hands over my friend's heart centre, I could feel a pulse passing between us, and then my heart seemed to move with a sort of side-to-side beat, which is totally alien to me. My friend stood up after I had finished his treatment and said, "Jane, I can breathe." The problem was that it had taken so much from me that I could hardly speak, and it took a full 24 hours before I had the energy to give him another treatment. Right, this is the dictation again. As we have said, the way in which the body is wired up is on a circular principle, and the way in which growth of the body's different structures and electrical systems takes place is also on a circular principle. It is known that the muscles are wrapped around the bones and the joints, but despite having sensations, there are no electrical channels inside the bones. These electrical circuits are extremely small and vary in size according to the work they have been designed to do. They are all part and parcel of the muscular system which they power, and of course they must also power the stomach, heart, liver, kidneys, intestine, and the spinal column, which is so terribly important. Within the heart there is of course no bone whatsoever, but there are very many of these tiny electrical channels, and it will be important to examine a heart taken from a living person very carefully. The human body, once the life has gone out of it, loses its electrical energy or life force very quickly, and it can be assumed that all of this electricity will have disappeared from it within 3 days. Somehow it will be imperative to find a body that has been dead only for a short time, and the research will have to be done as quickly as possible to discover where the various channels are situated. This is, we know, extremely difficult, as people do not give their bodies always to medical profession, and it will probably be necessary for the medical profession to ask that people offer their bodies, especially the younger persons. One of the ways in which an old person slowly dies is in the gradual slowing up of this electrical power within their bodies. Hence, a very old person who has recently died is not so very useful, as most of their life force or electricity has mostly passed from their bodies before their death, and the poor pathetic remains that are left by the time they are actually dead is not sufficient for such research. There are in your planet already too many accidents, far, far too many tragic accidents on your roads, which is another thing we shall be talking about later. And some of these unfortunate victims, if they were to give their bodies for this research, would be perhaps instrumental in enabling your doctors to gain knowledge that will in time help others. Then if that person whose life has been lost, so tragically lost, is fortunate enough to be reincarnated again fairly quickly, they will have helped in the formation of a better, more up-to-date medical profession whose services they may come to need sometime themselves. One thing must be understood at the outset, and that is that these tiny channels that we are speaking of, some of which are so small that a very, very large magnification will be needed to find them at all, these channels cannot be dyed with any chemical dye, whereas other tissues can be dyed with a harmless blue or green dye, but only the deepest purple, found in gentian violet, will be of any use for these experiments. This is an important factor and will be necessary in the future operations to fuse these tiny channels together to give many paraplegics in the use of their limbs again. We can promise you that these operations are done very successfully in very many up-to-date planets. This we know from all the information which is available to us. Once the heart and other muscular organs are removed from a dead body for medical research, dyed in this way and placed under very large magnification, we would suggest nothing less than 1,000 times, and possibly more than this, it will be very easy to see these channels coursing through the muscular structure, and it will be seen now that they are wrapped around the bone structure in this circular way, which is the whole way of growth. To discover these frequencies of the body, and they are all different strengths, you will find, for instance, a different frequency to power a finger than is needed to power one of the more large and powerful muscles in the leg or the back. The channels within the brain are again quite different and very delicate. This may seem obvious and at the same time too complicated to discover, but it is relatively simple compared with some of the complicated experiments which are currently going on within the medical profession today. All of these frequencies must be experimented with, and the result will prove to be absolutely vital if your doctors are to progress as they ought to. People skilled in the knowledge of electricity must be used to do this work. There are people clever enough in your little country of England to do this work and to make all these discoveries within a few months. That is, if the necessary bodies can be found for this research. We can only suggest that with the help of very many doctors, all dedicated to this task, that there will be very many people, even children, who have died tragically, upon whom a post-mortem, as it is called, can be done, and some of these experiments performed within a few days before the burial or cremation. These experiments must be performed immediately after death and up to 3 days after, as beyond this time all the life force will have gone from the body. Once the electricity or life force has gone out of the body, then the channels are dead also, and the body of the precious loved one is just like other flesh or meat, which is all the body is once it is dead, and becomes nothing more than a carcass. Although this is very hard for grieving relatives to understand sometimes, but if they can come to realize that the desperate tragedy of losing their loved ones can be turned into an opportunity to save others in the future, they must be able to find some consolation. So you have within the human body a skeletal framework which is wrapped in a circular way all around by its muscular system and its electrical system, all of which are part and parcel of the whole. And the same applies to the spinal column, which is, of course, the greatest possible importance. It is from the spinal column that everything emanates, and all of the channels and vessels which bring power to the body come down from this spinal column. And most of the operations for paraplegics will, of course, have to be done on this very complicated structure, which causes so very much trouble in the present population of today, many of whom have trouble in this area or claim to have a slipped disc. Very much trouble with this delicate piece of machinery, which is what it often is often caused by the fact that that person is very overweight, and the delicate mechanisms of the body cannot function with a weight load of more than it was designed to carry in the very first place, or the fact that many people have very sedentary lifestyles today, sitting for hours on end looking at a computer. In any operation of this nature, it will be necessary to dye the skin, bones and tissue over an area of some 3 or 4 inches, and of course use a local anaesthetic. A general anaesthetic would not be necessary because the person on whom the experiment is being carried out will be asked to participate themselves in such an operation. Once the doctors have performed many of these experiments and found suitable harmless dyes, it will become clear where all of these channels are situated, especially those within the spine itself. And we do not need to go into great detail about the experiments with the spine, because these go on already, and there are in your medical profession very many surgeons who are already very expert in very many ways, and they will quickly know what sort of researches will be necessary to make more discoveries about the spine, how it works, and how it is powered, and where all these channels are situated. Machines will have to be invented that will produce different frequencies of electricity, and obviously these will be very different to those that are used to power normal machinery run on mains electricity. These little machines will be able to send a current, if you like, down a human electrical channel or vessel, so as to move a finger or a limb or twitch a muscle within the body of the person who is being experimented on. The person will feel a sensation in that particular part of his or her body, so it will be impossible to perform this kind of procedure without the help and participation of the patient, him or herself. In the future, it will be possible to isolate these channels within the spinal column and to then pull them out and fuse them together. Stitching in this case is not the answer. The laser beam has already been discovered and is being used with great success, particularly in the eye surgery, but more work needs to be done, and it is really the only way to progress surgery on the human body. Cutting with knives is really extremely harmful very often because it causes a shock, which, although not apparent at the time, often gives rise to an anaphylactic shock immediately after the operation, and in extreme cases can even cause the death of a patient sometime later, and always means that the patient has to be very much stronger to make a proper recovery. The laser beam is the answer for the future. It's known that a circular metal wheel will create electricity, and this is how a generator works, and that it will produce a higher or lower frequency according to the speed at which the wheel is set to rotate per second. Tiny generators will produce new frequencies of electricity, their speed creating the frequencies needed. These tiny generators are the answer, and the laser beam must be experimented with different strengths. And human hair is perhaps the nearest thing to an electrical channel, and it does of course itself contain electricity, as is known already. Once a laser beam of the right strength has come to fuse a human hair together, then you are getting somewhere with the correct sort of laser for fusing these electrical channels together. England is always complaining about its lack of money. There will have to be tremendous changes made, and everyone knows this within the medical profession. Foolish, stupid people who have no idea how to run a business, let alone a country, have done everything they can to wreck your health system, which must be free for a very large number of people if it is to work in a modern way, but also it must have resources and wealth to make it possible to do experiments and to improve and to build very many of its hospitals. This is an obvious fact. Just throwing billions of pounds at it without any coherent plan is insane. And we're going through all that now. In the future, we hope that hospitals will become something very, very different to what they are today. But we will talk more of this when we have written the medical booklet. Only research into the electrical systems of the body will make progress of a very different kind possible within the medical profession, and it will move into other fields as well, such as that of mending a broken spine and giving life back to people who have lost the use of a limb or limbs, people who have a tumour within the brain, or who have some fault within their electrical systems or neurological control. This electrical research will be proved to be the greatest advance that the medical profession can make in future experiments. We have in the past directed the lady to whom we have dictated this knowledge to a healer of very great power. These people are extraordinary inasmuch as they have a very special sort of frequency themselves, and can, by placing their hands on the spine of someone, pass these electrical pulses into the spine of another person. This is what miracle healing or faith healing or whatever it is called really is. It is very simple really, as the brain of someone who can truly heal can be made to pass the correct frequency of electricity into the body of the person who needs to be healed. It rarely heals totally on its own, as the human body has its own healing processes, but it can help a person's body to begin to heal itself, and it always gives comfort. We are hoping that in the future such people will come forward to give their assistance to the medical profession, and the different types of power that they are able to emit can be measured and replaced, but all of them should be paid handsomely for their help. Once the different frequencies that these people are able to emit have been identified, and these generators have been produced to replace these frequencies, then they will be found to have uses in all manner of healing. After all, very few people have access to a healer, and in any case, healing can be very tiring to perform too often. A simple small machine used in the future to place this power into the body of a sick person, usually in the back where the terminals are situated, will bring immediate relief. Now, this is one of my comments. When my mother was alive, she went to a very powerful healer to help with a fractured wrist. She also witnessed the healing of a woman who had had many operations on her sinuses for a permanently blocked nose. Both she and my mother experienced relief as the correct electrical frequency for my mother's broken wrist and the other woman's sinuses was passed through their respective bodies, clearing the blocked channels and starting their own body's flow of healing energy, thus bringing an immediate sense of relief to both women. Dictation again. Sometimes this electricity will join up electrical channels and bring a complete cure in all manner of ways, but is not the whole answer, and is only an additive, to put it in simple terms. After an operation of the kind that we have in mind, and there will be many others, for instance, a heart or kidney transplant, These electrical machines would become essential because they would start the flow of life force again and reactivate all the various mechanisms within the body. It must be remembered that the body, put in simple terms, is really only a sack of water and is wired up like any other electrical circuit. Acupuncture is something that people regard with some interest at the present time, but it does not work for everyone. It will be interesting to study an acupuncture chart which will show where the Chinese doctors have found by experiment that it is beneficial to place the little metal needles, although they themselves reckon that this knowledge was given to them by a very advanced ancient race of people many thousands of years ago, but they do not know when, and most of the original knowledge has been lost. Sometimes acupuncture, far from bringing relief from illness, brings quite the reverse, as certain people find that they are not suited to it and the needles drain their energy instead of freeing it. As it has been discovered with this simple wiring up of a house or even over a motor car, there must be points where the wires all meet and are connected together, and this must mean that there has to be a junction box, and it is the same with the human body. There are points where the channels all meet and are connected together at various points in the body, which are vital and need to be discovered. The chart of an acupuncture doctor will prove useful because they have nearly found all of these junctions already, and this would save the researchers a lot of time. And actually, after I'd been to this lecture about the Yellow Emperor, which is the oldest knowledge that the Chinese have, I found a book by a Greek doctor who was studying Hippocrates, and he had a whole lot of other meridians, and there was no collaboration that anybody knows about with ancient Greece and China. So obviously the knowledge was all over the place, but anyway, it's all these things have been lost. All that the metal needles do is to key into these bodily junctions and sometimes remove the sensations of pain from the patient, and some indeed do undergo operations without any sensation of pain. Oh, this is in China, and also seem to make a better recovery after. But let it be known that in just the same way as with other electrical systems, it's possible in some patients to waste that electrical energy from their bodies with these needles, but connected to the right electrical frequency by the needles, you would get a very different result altogether. Electrical acupuncture is practice, but they have no knowledge of these frequencies, and the currents used mostly the wrong type and often very painful. We believe that this research will lead your medical profession into an entirely new field of endeavour. They will quickly discover for themselves how to make a damaged spine work once more, and how to make tiny impulse machines with the help of skilled electricians, which will revolutionise their medical practice. Let the medical profession realise at the outset that these secrets once learned, and we believe it will be possible to learn them within a very few months of constant research, that they must either be kept within your country or sold for a very high price to America to bring revenue into your medical profession. Money there must be brought into this country in all manner of ways to bring it prosperity and save it from financial ruin. I think we're on the way to financial ruin already, aren't we? Miles, I've finished.